It would be nice to have some insight from you, whether you feel it's opposites that attract, or if like attracts like. Which is it now? Some will say opposites attract, others will say like attracts like. So now which is it? See, this is an or game, and that's the trap. Or is always going to be the trap. It's supposed to bring up a red light. Hey, where are you? You withdrew again. So, to follow Appa's injunction, when in doubt, drop, just leave it. If it's meant to be, it will revisit you. If it's not yours, it won't come back. As was the experience of that composer I spoke about in my teacher's community. Do you recall that incident? No. Yeah. He panicked. My God, what celestial. By the time he'd found a pencil, much to his dismay, Appa, I had this dreadful, nice experience. Bottom line, let it go. Drop it. If it's yours, it will revisit you. And you won't believe it, 2 days later, he came in with a big smile on his face. He said, it came back while I was awake and had a pencil. So it doesn't help us with our inquiry now. Is it unlike that attracts? Boyd's already done that. Okay, you can be excused. We'll see you at supper time. And if anybody finds it too much, the best thing to do is to be honest, walk out. Or are both true, depending on the context. If I'm in the waking dream, what's it likely to be? Okay, before you answer that, let's look at something. It's one thing that came across with Swami Dayananda in Rishikesh, traditional Advaita. Is it your partner that you love? And of course, everybody was stunned. As was his custom, he would drop something that was true and let the vibration slow down a bit, then he would explain a little bit further. Is it your partner that you love? Or is it the pleased person that is evoked in you when you meet your partner? What is it that you love about your partner? Is it the love for your partner? Or is it the pleased person that's evoked when you think of your partner? What do you love? Is it that feeling? I mean, this is difficult to hear for the first time and say yes to it. It's just a seed. Given the nature of the mind, when I see somebody I've never seen before, isn't there something that I will recognize in them? And what is it that's recognized is what comes across now. And what has been recognized is what was and not what is. And when what was has got lovely memories, and if that one with which there are lovely memories happen to have these features, and then today, if I see these features, they are so similar to those that that comes forward and covers who's in front of me now. Why does that evoke? The presence of that one has evoked a pleased person in me. Something has been triggered, something is remembered, you'll never know when or who. But if something in the now triggers something in the then, and the then had lovely connotations, then the connotations of the now will be the same. They belong to that incident. If in that incident that's being brought into the stimulation had joy and happiness in it, then what would the feeling be now when you recall that? It would not be different to that. So if something in this new person in my life, if there's something about them that triggers something in them about someone else, it doesn't matter if it's sweet or it's sour. It's not you. It's them. And I'm judging that by the feeling I get. I'm a pleased person. Putting it in very different words. If I'm conscious, which means unconscious, in the waking dream, when I use that word conscious, it actually means unconscious. When I'm conscious, and I see something new or different, if a feeling arises, it means at some point there's something about that person, thing, event, or experience that triggers some kind of knowingness from then. And if that incident was charged with joy and lightness, then that on the outside, which unwittingly has triggered it, I project onto that person. That person comes into my life for the first time, and I have this warm feel. The way the mind is constructed, I will project that onto that person. That's why I'm feeling nice. And it might have nothing to do with that person at all. But there's something about that person that reminded me of them, and then in that incident there was X, Y, and Z. And I've projected it onto this poor person in front of me. And I'm expecting a little bit more of that. And I don't realize it's a projection. So I can have an instant like or an instant dislike. What does that mean? If it's instant, it means it's coming purely from recognition. If a total stranger walks towards me, how can I have an instant like or an instant dislike? I can be open and available. And the example given in the early days was if at school I had a problem with a teacher who had a big nose and bloodshot eyes, and if that one and myself were always at loggerheads, and I was always ridiculed by that one in front of the class, there's not much love lost between the two of you. Years go by, and I'm working for a firm, and they say, could you meet our colleague from the American branch is landing at the airport. We've arranged that you will meet under the clock tower because you won't know what he looks like. You will have spoken to him, but you won't know what he looks like. And isn't it like that when you speak to somebody for the first time you've never met? Is there some kind of impression that you're getting of what that person might be, what he might look? Where's that coming from? If you had no connection to that, you would remain in this instant not having a clue who it is you're talking to. And while this one is talking to his counterpart in America, he's got the same tone of voice as that teacher that I always had this run-in with. Now we make arrangements to meet under the clock tower because we don't know each other. Now, I've got a pretty good idea subconsciously of who is coming. This is called the waking dream. It's got nothing to do with this moment. It's got everything to do with that moment. So, okay, I hear over the intercom the plane has landed. I'm standing very close to the clock tower. And eventually somebody walks towards me with a nice, sharp, astute nose, crystal clear eyes, lilting and happy. That's not the one. So keep waiting there. What are you expecting? You're expecting what's in the subconscious to come forward. If a big-nosed chap came off the plane and walked remotely close to the kiosk, you say, hello, there I am. You look at you. Who are you? It's about, no, sorry, who are you? It's actually about the big nose. But this one that's walking towards me now says, oh, are you Patrick? And you look, and it's somebody who's absolutely opposite to what you'd brought forward. So it's good to be aware of how we interpret. So it still hasn't looked at the question, is it like attracts like, or is it unlike attracts unlike? When does like attract like, and when does unlike attract like? When you've got like and unlike, you've got two. There's a clue. So when I'm in my mind, I seek in my partner, subconsciously, what I don't have. I've got this, I've got that, and I'm so aware of a shortcoming or a shortfall or a shortness. It's happening subliminally, and I see in that one the abundance of that. And I'm starved of that. Unlike charges attracting each other. I mean, the polarity between female and male can be seen as opposites. And a different aspect of this, if I'm acutely aware of, it doesn't have to be consciously.
Are you guys eating in there now?
No, we're eating on the veranda.
Yeah.
On the veranda, yeah, there.
Thanks, Jim. Jimmy's delivering the food.
It's a bit early, isn't it? I hope it's not coming now. What was I saying? Okay. So it can be unlike in temperament, in features, in energy, and it can also be in terms of what that one has, that one is perceived to have, that has an abundance of that, and I don't have. And that's quite interesting. That's part of the package. It's what I am perceived to be starved of. And that's part of the package. So it could be that it's the opposite to what I experience in me that can attract me to the other. And when could it be a case of like attracts like? Could that be more in the realm of a seeker, of somebody who's gone a little bit past mind? It's like-souled people or like-minded people that find more resonance together. So it definitely ends up as like attracts like. Whatever comes into my life, there has been some part in it that's due to, maybe, what I'm holding on to. And if like attracts unlike, if it's opposites that attract, and I see in the other one qualities or characteristics that I don't seem to have, then that can be a very fulfilling relationship until those apparent deficits in me have been met, and they're no longer deficits. Then how does this relationship look? This is the utilitarian part of mind. Uses everything to best advantage for self-preservation. So it's just highlighting a few things the mind is capable of getting up to. But in other words, is a situation, an event, a person, an experience bringing up a green light or a red light? Obviously, I prefer green lights that say yes to me, that I resonate with. In other words, like attracts like in that sense. If I'm walking a certain path and I have made a reasonable amount of so-called progress on that path, then I help to understand why often in that case, friends who have been, associates that have been fairly close to me, for some rhyme or reason, start falling out of my life. But I won't necessarily know why. It might be because we just no longer are on the same page anymore. Then what is it that takes us apart? Is it me or is it him? Who's calling the shots? If it's no longer appropriate, and there must be a change, who's bringing about that change? And of course, we would like to say it's me. And that's the appearance. It's me, which is implying free will. Now, what would you say about free will? He made it very clear, so did Einstein. So the greatest intellect in the West and the greatest mystic from the East concurring. What can you say? Thy will be done. Or in German, thy will is done. That's a rendition of the Lord's Prayer in German. Thy will takes place. Do you like it or not? It takes place. Not may thy will be done. In German, they're very clear. Thy will takes place. And if I can really feel that, it's a relief. Who does it shift the burden onto? if there's no free will? It means I can take myself a little bit less seriously, in case I get too serious about me and my life and my path. It's all wound up in potness. Today's story about me will be different too. Tomorrow's story about me, depending what I recognize, what will come forward. And then that's who I will be. A veritable chameleon is what we are. That's what the chameleon is here to show us, maybe. That whatever color we land on, we become. And if I consistently land on black, I'll become black. And if I consistently land on violet, even if it's not in my nature currently, I will eventually become that. And this is perseverance. So when I am touched by the tiniest little bit of okayness, or freedom, or release, when I behold the wonder around me, pause. Who's registering this? The one who's registering beauty is not the one who's thinking. It's something deeper than thinking. Because when I'm thinking, I'm in a paradigm of awe. This or that, this or that. Him or her, now or then. Which a baby doesn't know, and a sage doesn't know, and an animal doesn't know, and a tree doesn't know, and a crow doesn't know. Nobody knows, except the adult human being. He's very special. Very special in that regard. And whatever he does, he has to practice. Nothing in nature has to practice. They get it right first time, every time. I wonder why. They just don't think. They respond to what is. Down to the milli microsecond, they respond to what is. As mentioned before, if you ever see a bird coming to land on a branch in a gale, that branch is moving all over the place, and this bird is coming into land. Now, if it was a human bird, I would be pausing there. Now, wait for the thing to steady a bit. Now, what angle should I approach it at? What? There's no thinking. Into the midst of this absolute chaos, it just comes straight in and lands. Never misses, never overshoots, never lands with one wheel up and one wheel down. Every time a coconut. All because it can't think. So it should say something about the other side of thinking. We know it's got a positive side, but it's got an adverse side. And if I'm a seeker, the adverse side outweighs the good side. If I am a materialist, it's the other way around. And it's unlike attracts. In other words, in this department in my life, I've got nothing. In that department in your life, you've got something. So we've got something I'd like to share with you. And once that department in your life is full, so to come back to Swami's statement from the Vedas, what is it that I love in my job, my car, my work, my hobby, my partner? If it doesn't evoke the pleased person within me, will I still be happy with it if it doesn't evoke the pleased person anymore? It's evoked the displeased person. So if it evokes a pleased person, does it matter what's in front of me? Who's this journey about? The one in front of me or the I that I am? I'm just playing with words here, don't take it seriously. But it's just to highlight how the mind can bend things to suit its needs. It can bend things. And always what needs to be cultivated, according to the experience I've had with my teacher, is not to take the mind as the last court of appeal. Because that will always give you pros and cons and you'll end up in such a maze. But what is the feel? You can hold scenario A up, be with it fully, but register what's feeling. Then encircle, put it away. Put something new. What does this bring out of me? What comes to me with that? And it's softness and it's tenderness. Or whatever it brings up. If it brings up a something, then maybe you can compare the first with the second. Might be easier for you to see, but you might not be willing to see if you're going on feeling and not thought. Your thought can say, this one is a wada 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 wada, and there's some value for that in your thoughts. And then when you think of that one, that value will come forward, which might not be the value, it's a projected value. Then that is what I base my decision on. It's what's moving through me in the moment. If as a result of this topic, one is starting to become aware that I am influenced subliminally by all the triggers that I see around me, they all have an effect on me. And if I see them every day, I don't realize I'm actually triggered to some degree every day. Because there are triggers in my environment that I can't take away, they're in my environment. And if I live in the same environment all the time, you might be exposed to subminimal triggers. Why is it that when I go on holiday to Mauritius, a totally new country where there's no triggers, how do you feel? You don't put it down to the fact that there are no triggers. You put it down, Mauritius, that's the place to be. Eh? So 5 years later, you've got this burden on your back. Mauritius. You go there with the same package you left South African airport with. You'll land there. Hey, but I thought Mauritius was not about Mauritius. You went there and you escaped all the triggers that are in your environment that you haven't resolved. Stay in Mauritius long enough with the baggage you bring with you, then you may have to come to Cape Town to have a break. I think you know that expression, the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, not where I am. So I climb over the fence and I graze a bit, and that's so nice, it's so different. It's a matter of time. You start noticing the grass on the other side. Just to heighten the awareness of what needs to be overcome. I need to see these things in me. And seeing it is already half the solution. If I'm not willing to see it, I'll continue to be the result of that. What is this? It's a form of self-inquiry. It's asking. Have you got it right, in other words? So in this regard, I want to make it quite clear that there might be a difference between discernment and gut feel. Discernment is viveka, to discern the difference between A and B, or gut feel. Well, like every word in English or any language, you have to understand the semantical loading of what that word is bringing forwards in this moment. It's used in a way that often, if not always, relates to a conditioned response or a triggered reaction. I've got a gut feel that this is the place to be. Not realizing something is triggered and is brought forward, a positive or a negative, and I project that onto my environment. It's this place that's so good for me. Something about that place has brought forward a feeling which doesn't belong to this time-space vacuum or continuum. What is that? The more I'm aware of these potentialities, the better prepared I might be. If there's an urge to do, or be, or say, or want, that is a given. We referred to it in the past, Ichha Shakti, power of desire. It's a good thing. It can have, like everything, a flip side. Because desire automatically implies I'm lacking something. If you felt tripto hum, you felt as though nothing was needed, you felt self-fulfilled. Is there anything you could desire? So what is desire actually telling you? It's telling you, I still believe that I need something outside of the tent, inside the tent. I somehow need more of that, and then. And that is that red tractor syndrome. If I had a red tractor, then I would be. If I had the perfect partner, then life would be a walk in the park. If I didn't have to have a second-hand car, amazingly beautiful my life would be. It's all about if-then. And then you acquire that which you've longed for, you've desired, and are you at peace? In that moment, yes. That desire has kept you in a state of tension, of two-ness. It hasn't materialized, but the moment it materializes, wham, you finally got what you wanted. You've slipped on the ring. Or you've got the prize. Or whatever is, you've got it. And in that moment, can there be any desires in that moment of fulfillment? Can't be any desires. The moment a desire has been fulfilled, contentment. And again, can we capitalize on that fullness? It didn't have anything to do with the object of my desire, but it brought me home. I wasn't looking outside of me for something. For a moment, I was free of mind. I was free of projections. I've actually come home momentarily. And I project this happiness on tractor or partner or. And yes, I might have the most beautiful partner, the most supportive partner. It doesn't interrupt this kind of game in the background with other things, other people, other events. And it I'm sure it will be in the experiential field of some of you, if not all. You might know somebody, or you might have experienced this, when two people were meeting each other for the first time, who had a certain reaction, either pravriti or nivriti, and when you got to know that person, that all changed again. Why? Because what you were responding to belonged to them, and something about them reminded you of them. And you said, don't want more of that. It's got nothing to do with that person in front of me. Mostly. But if I'm with that person in their company and I'm willing to be open and soft and available, I might learn that that person's got a nature very different to that. That was projected. Invariably, it will be the case. But I didn't give it time. I acted too quickly. And that was the advice. If ever I'm seriously triggered by someone or something and I feel that I've got just reason to be angry, do I suppress it? Do I vent it? Venting it, I think we know it's not going to have any good consequences. Suppressing it, also not. So why don't I just express it, but not to the other initially? Can I just get down to my desk with a pen and paper and write furiously exactly what I feel, getting it off my chest, as if the other was there? And when you've finished, fold it, put it in your bottom drawer, and then visit it a week later, and you will laugh at what you've written. That was written in a wave. I'm not in a wave anymore. Now I say, thank God I never sent that. Because when you're in a wave, you are totally irrational. You're living in then, which doesn't pertain to what's here. So if I'm sensing I'm triggered, if I'm sensing I can't suppress and I can't express, then let me express it as best I can on paper. At least I've got it out of my system somehow. And then put it in that bottom drawer. Let it mature. It'll come out a very different vintage. You'll sell it for more. You'll think, my goodness. And you will see what color it's painted in. It's the color of your stuff at that point in time. And thank God that changes, because that all belongs to partners. It's not who you are. It doesn't belong to clay. Clay is more the witnesser that can see the drama of partners. Is there anything anybody would like to say or share on this or anything else? So an aspect of most so-called spiritual journeys, not all, do highlight the necessity and the beauty inherent in genuine aloneness. Aloneness is diametrically opposed to loneliness, which we get confused often in society. I want to be alone. Are you unsociable? Are you one of those nerds? It's also an anagram of all oneness, aloneness. And that's just what Christ wanted, to be alone. Before that, monstrous hurdle, monstrous difficulty, just to be alone. Aloneness. Because in aloneness is where I'm able to make contact, not while I'm being sociable. In sociableness, I lose myself. In aloneness, I have the potential to find myself. But it will go through waves of good and bad. And if it's coming up in me, it's coming up in me. What to do? Do you want to continue to suppress it? Or can you just say, okay, let be what is. But I have to hold on to the center, like a little monkey sometimes, if and when the stuff comes up. And when too much stuff seems to come up, I've got permission to say this. Appa often gave assurance to some of us who had significant stuff coming up by making a very valid remark, at least valid in my book, because of its appropriateness. It seems as though God gives you enough grace to handle what's about to come up, almost as a support or a means of assurance. And especially after stuff has come up, if I can give thanks and remember the one. Can I remember the one in the midst of and in spite of everything in the senses screaming the opposite? And that's like attracting like. What's inside in my innermost is the power of the one. But I've usurped it thinking it's my power. And that was the problem. Thank you. You can do more of that.
Pardon?
You can do more of that.
Well, let's start. And what you've just said now about, or it relates to this, but what's coming up in me and has been for a while is what we touched on earlier as well. And it goes right back to, I think, a comment that I think Corne made about the the prayer for, what is it, the Serenity prayer, where I think in the subsequent phrase there's a reference to, and he used the words, I think, hardship is a pathway to peace. And you told the story of the hardship of the guy that wrote the hymn that we listened to as well, who lost his daughters. And what it brought up for me, really, probably from the past, is emotion in relation to loss. The loss of that man's 3 daughters. In a sense, the loss of our daughter, who suffered a severe mental breakdown 18 years ago and hasn't recovered. And then more recently, just this week, I've had a client come in, a family actually, again, parents with a son who's epileptic, and has had a normal life. He's about 18 years old now, but about 5-6 years ago, we went into a very severe decline, and is almost nothing more than a vegetable looked at from outside at this stage, where he's lost mental capacities and physical capacities, can't talk anymore, has difficulty walking, has to be helped in everything with his parents. And what struck me was the incredibly tender loving of the parents for this boy as I worked on him. And then it kind of resonates with the story of the man with the hymn, of his ability being connected in a loving space to go on and do the good work that he did. And also the challenge that Jane and I have had dealing with our process over the last 18 years. And the spur that's been for growth. But it still brings up emotion. You know, there's still so much stuff in relation to this. So how does one deal with it?
In personal relationships.
Personal, yeah. Well, in relation to our situation with our daughter, yeah. I speak for myself, my relation to the situation.
Well, the first thing is to acknowledge it and know that it is there, to avoid any attempts to suppress it. And now is the time to practice okayness. We can't practice okayness while things are all going well, because that's meaningless. Okayness means when the storm breaks, am I still okay? And if I can become a tad philosophical and know that life is about swings and roundabouts, and in this context, that will seem that way. In another context, the same thing will seem different. And therefore, meaning is totally related to your interpretation of it and not the truth. And then maybe I can just a little bit relax with what is. It might be very hard, but to acknowledge that I, in my own strength, am very limited, but there is a greater mystery at play here that we need to acknowledge. And that is the important part. That is what I am internally grateful to my mom and my aunt. When my brother and my nephew both died in theatre and through prayer were brought back to life. Just on that. It was something that reset my compass to true north when I was 13, because my brother had died in ICU. And as that news broke to my mom and my aunt, who were waiting outside the ICU, the operating theatre. It wasn't ICU, it was in the operating theatre. They tried several times to get the heart going again. Anyway, to cut a long story short, the doctor said, well, I'm sorry, he's passed away. And then Paddy said to Mom, as my aunt, quickly, let's find the School of Truth. If you ever remember the School of Truth, Michael Campbell, amazing miracles came out of that school. And they rushed to the nearest phone booth in the hospital, and they had a 24/7 prayer group going. Anybody in need could just phone immediately. And they would immediately go on the prayer list. And by the time they got all the way back to the theatre, the surgeon looked quite perplexed and said, don't know what to say, but see some strange things happening here. Like he seems to be recovering. And he did. And then a few months later, that was not on my mom's side, this was my mom's sister's side, her son Digby had been born with a hole in the heart. And the doctors and specialists had said, we can't do anything now, we have to wait until the body's a bit more mature. But there's virtually no chance of surviving. He was like calling a spade a spade. So having witnessed what happened to my brother, she also found the school of truth about Digby. And I don't know how long it was later, hours or days, Digby seemed to be quite fine. So Paddy, feeling quite moved, took Digby to the same specialists and said, could you please do these tests again? He laughed. Says, not necessary. I know what I'm doing. These things don't change. So that was like a smack in the face. So then they were reminded, okay, there are certain mindsets and there are certain mindsets. Let's try another specialist who has no previous knowledge of Digby. Let him do the tests. Otherwise, you carry the old story forward, like it's a characteristic of mind. It's nothing to do with that doctor. This is what we all do. We carry something forward and project it onto Digby. You've done the tests. You know he's not going to make it. That's the label he gets. And you come back and you say, I think he's feeling fine. Sorry. No. This is the truth. So Betty went to other specialists, had the same tests done, and the end result was, what have you come here for? This child is normal. Is there not a hold on? What are you talking about? We've done all these cardiac tests you asked for. He's fine. Now, what is that? Is that power within me, or is that power outside of me? It doesn't matter as long as you're devoted to that power and you have reverence for that power. In other words, you empower that power. So to give your power away to that which does not produce life, love, joy, harmony, is different to giving your power away to something that does. So I don't know if that answers, if there's still some part of that. So it's often very hard to talk about these things because the moment you open the subject, you can, I can feel all that's brought forward from the past. And as a result, you can't be heard because the noise from the past is too great. They can't really hear you. As Christ said, they listen, but they do not hear. They've got then rush. It's then that's rushing at them. It's nothing to do with this moment. And I don't have the discernment to see. It's nothing to do with my environment. If I look around, it's just so beautiful. Where's this coming from? Why am I subject to this again? And the moment that comes, there is the dwelling on that as if I've done something wrong. What must I do to undo it? And then another story starts within the story. Instead of saying, okay, let's just be quiet. Let's return to the stillness that I am. And pick up on where to go. If it's to the warmth in your hands, if it's to the stillness in your chest. But the storm is broken, so you need to find a port which has no storm. And that comes with practice. I habitually go there. And I let it go. Over to you, beloved. Thank you. All of this are my projections and from my fears. And if I keep reading them, then like attracts like. It's your problem, Lord. I let go. And I'm quiet. And in the moment you've really let go, you actually feel it. You feel the release. But now stay with that feeling of release. It is gone until you revisit it and bring it back. That's why Christ said, your sins have been forgiven you, but don't look back over your shoulder. That's how it was. You'll pull them all back. And that is the doubter in me. Sin no more, but don't look back over your shoulder into then. That's the habituated adult mind living in then. And all of the projections come from then. And I'm not in present time anymore. Can I be here with this now? Not knowing what it is now in this context. Can I be like that little child again? Not with this adult knowing, which means projection, which means then. Got nothing to do with that. And as I mentioned to you, what touched me deeply with my eye surgeon, I was seeing her after the operation, going to her office and seeing this mug on her desk. Touched me very deeply. Be still and know that I am God. And when I first met her before the operation, it was a lady, and I just had such a reasonably good, warm, open feel. I just felt this is the one that needs to operate. And then after the op, some week or two later, going in for a checkup and seeing this mug on the desk, it wasn't there for show. It was almost like out of view. When you were there, you saw that mug. And she said she can't work unless she knows God is delivering and working through me in every way. Well, she said something similar to that in a letter that followed, because I wrote to her saying how touched I was by that mug and by her and the feeling I had about her. And then she wrote back and she said, oh, everything is guided by the love of the one. Which comes back to sanctity. Do I hold the first cause in such a way to truly mean namaste? I greet God within you. Who really means that today? Or is it namaste, namaste, namaste? Form, conscious. But what does it mean when you bring left and right? When you bring duality together? Why, when you pray, do you bring your hands together? Is to subconsciously remind you there's one, not two. Nobody prays like this. You pray like this or like that or whatever. Namaste. Old Indian greet was meant literally, I greet God within you, because He's not outside of you. He's only been shifted outside of me because of this wrathful, vengeful image we've got in the Old Testament. But in India, those who have been to India have seen the monkey, Hanuman, not the monkey we know with the mind in the West, but Hanuman, the greatest devotee of truth. You've seen paintings of him opening up his chest. You've been to India, and what's sitting inside his chest? It's Krishna. In other words, God, or the kingdom of heaven. It's saying the same thing. As the power is within you, but not power that we know as power. But if this seems like quite a daunting way, the good news is that it's an old maxim that I've always defaulted to. The slower we start, the quicker we finish. Because of how indelible the first cut is. If my first experience of meditation is proceeded with cautiously, methodically, the context is right, the ambience is right, it's going to be my first cut. I do everything in my power to make sure that first cut is pleasing, because it is going to hold the key to how easy or how difficult it is to return to it. And put into real life was that anecdote we said. Johnny is going to be introduced to cauliflower. His older brother's worst nightmare. He's never tasted cauliflower, but whatever is the first cut with cauliflower is going to have a lasting effect. Now this mother is wise. She knows this. First cut is the deepest. So she covers it under a layer of what he loves, which is cheddar cheese. Covered with cheddar cheese. So when this lands in front of him, the first cut is, wow, this is all right. There seems to be stuff in it, but man, it's good. Next meal, Johnny, what would you like? Yeah, I'd like some of that again. Some of that stuff with cheese on. Okay. You don't make a big issue of that. Man, that. And eventually he asked, what is it? Johnny, that is the most interesting part of everything. But now the first cut is there. Now there's the willingness to try it a little bit more alone. But you're approaching it in the right foundation. The belief is that it's wonderful. First cut. So how to use first cuts to best advantage. So if I'm starting a new whatever, and I've really understood what it is with regards to first cut in any department of my library, then I make a point of making sure that when I start on day one, there's going to be smooth sailing, a plan for the best possible, undisturbed, equally flowing, smooth flowing, uninterrupted sequence. That's going to be my first introduction to archery, whatever, baking bread, doesn't matter what it is. But when the text is right, or the background, or the context is right, and it's appropriate, and it's uplifting, then whatever is in that context, is colored by that flavor. And when I come back to it, it's going to be so much easier to come back to. If it's to do with training a mind to be fixed and one-pointed. It's difficult to bring the mind back to something it doesn't like. Very easy to bring it back to something it likes. So we can use mind to unseat mind. That is the habit or propensity of mind. It gravitates to what it enjoys, and it suppresses what it doesn't enjoy. So use that facility, even if it's a bit of lying. Your favorite cheese. And then gradually, broccoli is there without the cheese, but it's not one of those anymore, because the first cut was, this is quite okay. It's when the next vegetable comes coated in cheese that there might be a question raised. But that's another story. The story is the first cut. If there's anything I can do when I endeavor a new undertaking, whatever it is, can I do what is in my 3/10 to make sure that the first cut is appropriate? Because that's going to determine how much I'm going to continue and persevere, and how quickly I'm going to get bored and look for something new. It's based on association, as the mind always does. It associates what's in front of me with what was there. It's this association that has to work for you or against you. Now we're using that trick to actually unseat it. So Rowan, where's your attention hanging? You must find out where it is. You should have stopped me a long time ago. Something was not there, something there was a disagreement, something that wasn't heard properly. But you passed it. And when you passed it, your attention got stuck. And when your attention gets stuck, you get tired, you get restless. And that's the cue that there's been something that didn't quite sit. It'll come to you later, it doesn't matter. But if it happens again, just say, sorry, could you just say that again with different words? Sorry, I wasn't here at the moment. Do you mind saying it again? And at least you got a chance to see where you might have missed something.
Patrick, I have felt extremely sort of knocked out since getting here yesterday. Like incredible heaviness, fatigue, battling to hear, and I feel that something's been unlocked now, and it's to do with the life change I've made and going to Stanford, leaving all the noise, etc. Wanting to step into a more heartfelt space. And with all your talk about oneness yesterday and today, I think my mind was resisting because I've experienced instances that there are times where I'm in heart, and then all the baggage and momentum of my last 50 years of being in mind is pulling me away from that.
Pulling you away from what?
Away from heart.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sort of instant but vacillating between head and heart. My old world is wanting me back, the world of mind. And I just suddenly feel like actually hearing the oneness, and especially when you spoke about wonder, although I've heard it many times, and living as if it is a miracle. I suddenly got inspiration for that opportunity that I have in San, that I've given up a huge amount for. And I just had clarity suddenly about where this nearly day and a half of heaviness is coming.
And how's it feeling now?
Beginning with life. Quite exhausting.
It's exhausting looking at an illusion. In other words, what mind is talking about. If I listen to mind, I'm not saying this was your case, I'm just sidetracking now. If I am lost in corridors of mind, it doesn't matter how sublime they are, it's still mind. Might take you into higher realms, but ultimately it's still mind. Mind needs to be erased. Now to quote Bhagavan, it's not to be suspended, it's to be erased. So while Neo-Advaitins talk of a suspended mind, because if the mind is suspended, the problem isn't there. The problem of duality, it's not there. It's freedom. But it's only free as long as mind stays suspended. But when it returns, it returns. And that is the principal difference between the Neo-Advaita of the West today and the traditional Advaita that insists on prolonged meditation. In other words, to allow these vasanas or tendencies to arise and to just sit through it. In other words, it's been coined as a phrase, burning off your karma through persistence and ongoing perseverance. We've come in with a truckload of impressions. How many times haven't we been subject to a life with pain? And we come forward with a lot of stuff, unresolved. And because it's unresolved, we come back. Once it's all resolved, there is no need to come back. So if I am to see something clearly that I couldn't see before, it's just that enough has been shed that I'm now able to see it, whereas I couldn't have seen it before. So I see things as they come up more differently. But in Bhagavan's language, an erased mind is a mind where all the vasanas have been burnt off. It's not that I had one moment of mind freeness and I thought I was enlightened. It's Neo-Advaita, which lasts days, weeks, months. But mind hasn't been erased. At some point it will be triggered. And then there is this despair. But I thought I was free. All too common cry. Instead of utilizing that moment as a moment that was outside of my stories. And can I just be in that moment? Recall that moment. How did it feel? You know what I'm talking about. Can you recall that moment where you were at peace with yourself. Because whatever you allow on the screen of consciousness is what is in the moment. And you are the gatekeeper of what is. What do you allow on that screen? Is it more stories? Well, then we have to pay the price. If I can see, oh, here's a story coming, drop it. If I have that, discipline. Discipline has the same root as disciple. I mean, somebody who's got faith and trust in oneness. Am I disciplined? And if not, then life has a way of saying, well, if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. You don't want to spoil the child, so have some rod. In other words, is there time to be punished for being mindless? If it helps to correct the child, then yes. Say what comes now. Say what's left. Say what's left. Even if it's the same.
I feel that I'm in transition and I have to respect that and not understanding that I'm in transition. I often get lost and astray. Just to respect that and that's right now.
All right. And in sync with this is the perception of free will. If it's true that there isn't any free will, how come I'm ending up here? I mean, so the mind can then go into a story and say, I'm not ready, it's too quick, or whatever the story is, or we can have patience and just not do anything different for the moment until the dust is settled, and then see if something shows itself. But if it shows itself after the dust is settled, it's not necessarily coming from mind anymore. It's coming from what you needed to see by experiencing that. I had to experience things that I didn't want to see, and one of them was the abyss. And I mean the abyss. You know about that. The dark night of the soul. It's not a place you want to be, where you feel absolutely God-forsaken. No hope. There's no access to a supreme being. There's just nothing. It's just you and yourself and all of your stuff. And it's called the dark night of the soul, not without reason. There's just nothing. That's the dark side. And the good news is, the darker the dark side of a coin is, the brighter the bright side is. If I finally see how the human condition, without any support from divine intelligence, you can see so clearly that without that, there is nothing. And that is a common outcome of being in an abyss experience. You see the limitations that you have as a being, independent of whatever your word is. Independence of any feeling or association with a benign first cause. Talk from there when it comes. Anybody else wants to say anything on that subject? It doesn't mean we all have to go into the abyss, for heaven's sake. Okay? If the carpet is tugged and we feel the tug and we do something, you don't need to have the carpet tugged and tugged and tugged until you're thrown into the abyss. That's the ultimate tug.